way I could get, this is conversations with people who know me. This is conversations with my nail tech. This is conversations with strangers. I'm like, the only way I could get them to stop hounding me is to say, once the pandemic's over, I'm going to have another celebration to celebrate my relationship at the nudist resort. I'm going to have a naked wedding.
Right. So there.
So there you go. And then they would shut up. But if they didn't say that, they wouldn't. They would keep at me, keep at me, keep at me. Like there was no possibility of me not being excited. I couldn't have any feelings other than excitement. And they were going to make that excitement happen, or I wasn't getting to end the conversation or leave.
That's wild. Like, why? What?
I know why.
Tell me.
So this is my theory, right? I'm still gathering data. Like this is, I got married in February. So like, you know, we're still gathering data. But I suspect what it is that as women, let's go back in time, where as women, we only had 3 options. We were a prostitute, we got married, or we joined some religious convent of some sort.
Right. Yeah. Specifically European history.
History, right?
Okay. Gotcha.
So those were your 3 options for women to have any kind of to survive.
Right. Yes. Agreed.
You couldn't be single.
Yeah.
You got lynched or killed or witch burning, depending on what era and depending on what part of history we're talking about. You being a single woman that owned property was not acceptable.
Yeah. It's hardly even possible.
Yes. So you had those 3 options: marriage, prostitution, or join religion.
Right. So you either make yourself, give yourself some dignity by either becoming a nun or getting married, or throw the dignity part out completely so that nobody will want to marry you.
Yes, but
right. And if you become a nun, you still get to get married to Jesus.
Yes, you still get to get married to God. Yeah.
So 2/3 marriage, 1/3 making yourself unmarriable. Okay.
Exactly. Unmarriable, but still, they're still trying to marry you off. Like there's still the hope that somebody will marry you yet.
Right. Will come along and save you from your
come along and save you from your life but you still have to use your vagina in order to survive.
Yeah.
So
and in all 3 of these situations, you must be saved by someone.
Yes.
You know, either it's the church / Jesus, or it's your husband, or someone who will come and, you know, take you out of this life of misery that you're clearly living if you're a prostitute.
Yeah.
Okay. Yes.
All right. So marriage is just back then, and for many hundreds of years, and for some people today, is still a form of slavery, because you are not your own individual person. Even things like, let's take the rituals of marriage. So your father walks you down the aisle to pass on that you're no longer his problem, to pass on to the husband that now you take her.
I thought you were going to say property, and then you said problem. It was even better.
Yeah. And now you pay for her. So there's still the dowry was part of it, how many chickens you got, like all those things. So again, she is not an active participant. She has no choice. And her value as a woman is how well she marries depends on what status what you're bringing to the family. So if that's it, like that's her value, That's why she's not allowed to be sexual. That's why she needs to be a virgin. That's why she needs to, you got to get a good price for her.
Right. Exactly.
And
Yeah. It's like taking a cow to the market.
it's taking a cow to the market. That's all it was.
Yeah.
Now, so let's fast forward. What better way to control women than to force them into the slavery of marriage, but to get them on board? And the best
Right.
way to get them on board is to give them one day of their lives where they get to be in charge. They get to
Right.
control the narrative. They get to have this dream day.
Yeah.
So by giving women the wedding day, they basically, what happened is got women on board with getting married because you get this one magical day of your life.
Right. Right. And so, oh my God, so much of our culture, of women's culture in the westernized world is so based on the wedding day. Like Lenny and I had an episode a little while ago where we talked about gender roles in Disney films.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things that we kept coming back to was how frustrating it is, and it was for me as a child, to see like the entire movie where we get to know and love this character, and she's like this feisty, plucky woman, and the whole movie culminates with her getting married, and then it ends.
Yes.
And I was always like, well, but then what? Like, they lived happily ever after doesn't really feel like much of an ending to me. Like, what does she do next? But it doesn't matter because the wedding is the culmination, like the peak of her life.
That's
and
it.
that just, it's so sad.
That's exactly it. And it's the best brainwashing that there is, because women are struggling to get to the peak of their life, which is the wedding day. And then after that, it doesn't really matter. It doesn't really matter what her life is like. It doesn't really, that's why we don't see movies about it. It's not important. It's not important what her day-to-day life looks like. It's not important how they co-parent with each other. It's not important how they manage the bills. It's not important. Her opinion and her life is now irrelevant.
Yeah, except obviously when she bears children, then she becomes the mom, and then her main role in life is to be the mom, which is what we see depicted everywhere all the time. Like that, once you're above a certain age, which seems to keep like creeping younger and younger, by the way, in pop culture, like once you pass that age, you're now a mom. Like if you are, I have a few friends who are actors, and basically once they passed 30 years old, no matter how young they appeared, they were getting mom roles only. And the same goes for people I know in the porn industry. Like, depending on your looks and whether you've decided on getting implants, once you pass a certain threshold, you are now a MILF. Whether you've ever had a child or not, you are now forever a MILF.
Yeah.
And again, that age keeps creeping downward from everything I hear.
And that brings us to the next stage of the consummation of the marriage.
Oh. Wait, this is still a thing?
It is. You would be surprised how many texts I got from people saying, have you consummated the marriage yet? Have you gotten how's married sex? Have you consummated the marriage yet? Have you consummated the marriage yet? But people who
do
know
they
me.
know you? Like
Yes.
Oh my God, that's really weird. Like, I mean, do you get people just randomly texting you like on a Saturday? Like, hey, did you have sex last night? Like,
no.
Tell me everything.
No, but everybody wants to know whether or not I consummated my marriage.
That is weird.
So then
That's
let's go back in history and time. Right, of why it's still prevalent here now, because we don't understand why we care. Why does anybody care whether or not I have sex with the man who I've had sex 1,000 times before this day happened? Right.
And that's pretty common knowledge. It's not like you two are pretending like you never got it on.
No, there's podcasts talking all about it. So it's because once the wedding happens and the women have bought into their magical day, you have to get knocked up as fast as possible before she can change her mind.
Right.
So the wedding night was all about, after the wedding, then there was all of this stuff about consummation.
Yeah.
So there people would watch, depending if it was how high up in royalty you were.
Yeah.
There would be a whole audience making sure that you actually consummated the marriage, so that it was, so that the heir, if the heir happens, that it was the actual, there was no hanky panky going on. So
that's right. I forgot about that.
Yeah.
I think I've seen, like, well, God, I was in high school, so take this with a grain of salt. But we went to Europe for like a school trip, and we went to the palace at Versailles, and there was like the public bedroom for the king and his wife, and then their private separate bedrooms. And the public bedroom had like a viewing area.
Mm-hmm.
Like there were chairs set up.
Yeah.
Fucking, I forgot all about that. Oh my God. Weird. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because again, it's that piece around property and ownership and value, right? And the value of a woman was to give an heir.
Yeah.
Right? She's a breeder. That's it. That's the only purpose. And she got to have the wedding. So what more do you want? You got to have your special day. That's all you get. And now you need to pop out babies. And if you don't pop out babies, then you can be replaced or murdered, or all these things.
Mm-hmm.
And it was totally acceptable to have affairs and all those things, except for her. She could never. That would land her dead.
Yeah. Yeah. And I like, my kind of understanding of especially European like royalty and nobility is that like as a woman, before you were married, your body was constantly under surveillance to make sure that nothing happened, that nobody touched you, so that your purity could be ensured for your wedding night.
Yes.
And then basically between the wedding night and the time that you produced an heir for your husband, which is, by the way, purely a mechanism of keeping the power and wealth of that husband within his own bloodline. It had nothing to do with who you were. Although if you were of high quality breeding stock, that was better, obviously. Yes. But like up until you had produced the heir, and the heir had either taken up the power of the family or had reached an age where it was like reasonable that this person would survive to be able to do that, your body was still under constant surveillance, because if something went wrong, you needed to be able to produce another heir, toot sweet.
Yes.
And I feel like the only women in those positions that really got to have any degree of freedom were women who had either already produced an heir that had made it to adulthood and could take over, or women who were like widowed, basically.
Yeah. But then you would be married off again. So the family would marry you off again as a widow to try to get more, because you try to gain more power, or get something. Like you weren't allowed to be a widow and independent. Like you were allowed a certain amount of grieving period, and then your family married you off again so that you could, here you go, you can bring more wealth to the family.
Right. That is true. I'm thinking of a few examples now.
Yeah.
Of that happening. So it's like, I think basically if you were widowed and postmenopausal, you could do what you wanted.
Yeah, pretty much. If you're like, no one wants to have sex, if you didn't want to have sex, you couldn't have sex anymore, and you couldn't produce an heir, and your husband has died, then you might be able to. And you didn't have any wealth, because if you had wealth, you would be married off so that somebody would want that wealth, because it couldn't be in your female name.
Yeah. Yeah. With very few exceptions. Every now and then I like hear about some awesome woman who like totally broke all those rules. And the reason that we still know about them is because they were so weird at the time.
Yeah.
But okay. So all of this coming back to the consummation of the marriage, like I understand that that's very much a thing historically that people were really concerned about, but it is very weird to me that people are still concerned about it, because who gives a shit anymore? I mean, are there still like laws on the books where like if you can't prove that you consummated the marriage, he can divorce you